Have you ever wanted to feel untouchable, not just in body, but in spirit? To move through this world without flinching every time someone disappointed you, without your chest tightening when you're overlooked, dismissed, or forgotten. Maybe deep down, you've imagined a version of yourself that doesn't shatter at the sound of a slammed door, a harsh word, a silent night. A version of you who feels nothing. No sting of judgment, no fear of abandonment, no aching loneliness, just calm, just control, just peace. But if you're honest, that peace has always felt just out of reach, because you're tired, and not the kind of tired that sleep fixes. You're soul tired, from smiling when it hurts, from being strong when you want to collapse, from answering "I'm fine" when you're anything but. You've learned how to keep going, how to function, and how to wear the armor, but you've forgotten what it means to feel safe taking it off. You know how to survive, but you've forgotten how to live. And it's not your fault. You were taught to perform strength, to power through, to be unshakable. But what if the strength you've been chasing isn't real strength at all? What if the truest kind of strength isn't in the pretending? It's in the breaking. In the choosing to sit with what hurts instead of running from it. In the quiet decision to stop fixing and just feel. Real strength isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself. It sits beside your pain and says, "I'm not leaving." It doesn't numb. It listens. It doesn't toughen. It softens. Because the bravest thing you'll ever do is meet yourself exactly where you are. Maybe you've spent years wishing you didn't care about what they said, about who left, about who stayed, but never really saw you. You've tried to build walls, not realizing they were keeping you locked inside. You've learned to laugh on cue, speak when spoken to, and a nod like everything's fine when inside you're screaming for someone to see through the act. But you kept going, because you had to. And somewhere along the way, you became the strong one, the dependable one, the one who doesn't break. But let me ask you this. Who holds you when you're holding everyone else? Maybe for once you just want to fall apart and not be judged for it. To cry without having to explain. To be messy, confused, human. But you've been told that vulnerability is weakness. That pain makes you fragile. That feeling deeply is something to hide, not honor. And so you buried it, pushed it down, locked it away, told yourself, "I'm fine, I'll deal with it later." But pain doesn't wait patiently. It grows. In the silence, in the pretending, in the spaces you avoid. And here's something no one told you. Pain is not a punishment. It's a signal. A knock at the door of your inner world saying, "Please don't leave me here alone." The more you ignore it, the louder it gets. The more you fight it, the deeper it cuts. But when you finally turn toward it, meet it with compassion instead of shame, something begins to shift. You realize you don't have to carry all of it alone. You were never meant to. You see, healing doesn't happen in the denial of pain. It begins in the permission to feel it, to name it, to sit with it like an old friend who knows too much but never judged you for it. Strength is in the absence of emotion. It's the courage to embrace it. And the moment you stop pretending, stop performing, stop hiding, is the moment you begin to return to yourself. Carl Jung said, "We are not what happened to us. We are what we choose to become." And maybe that's what today is about. Not becoming harder, tougher, colder, but becoming real, becoming whole, choosing to stop running, choosing to feel, choosing to heal. You don't need to be unbreakable. You just need to know you're allowed to break and still be worthy of love, still be whole, still be enough. It's not about shutting down or pretending nothing ever touched you. Real strength isn't silent or cold. It's breathing through the ache, standing in the middle of your storm, heart still open, even when every part of you wants to run. It's having the courage to show up while your voice shakes, to keep feeling even when you've been told again and again that feeling too much is weakness. It's choosing to stay present even as your wounds still pulse beneath the surface, still tender, still whispering old stories you wish you could forget. The bravest thing you can do is not to hide your scars, but to sit with them, to let the pain speak, to hear the things you've ignored for years, not to fix them, not to force healing, but to simply listen. Because real healing isn't about putting the pieces back together perfectly. It's about allowing yourself to fall apart when you need to without shame. It's about surrendering to the truth that your pain is not your enemy. It's your messenger. And it's been waiting patiently for you to stop running. If these words are reaching you, it's not an accident. They found their way into a part of you that's been quiet for a long time. The part that feels too much. The part that carries the weight no one else sees. The part that wonders why joy feels fleeting and peace feels like a distant dream. You've walked through this world with your heart on the line, feeling like you missed the secret that made everyone else so confident, so whole. You've looked at others and wondered how they make it look so easy, while you're still learning how to breathe through the ache of simply existing. But what if your depth is your brilliance? What if your tenderness is your greatest strength? What if the thing you've been trying to numb or hide is the very thing that makes you who you are? The world never taught you how to hold your sensitivity. It taught you how to silence it. But you were never meant to be numb. You were meant to feel the world in colors others can't see. And yes, that's a heavy gift, but it's a gift all the same. Healing isn't about pointing fingers. It's not about blaming the ones who hurt you or the moments that broke you. It's about finally turning inward. About realizing that the echo of pain doesn't begin with the outside world. It begins with the pieces of yourself you were forced to abandon. That's the hardest truth. The pain isn't always about what just happened. It's about the wound it touched. The rejection that woke the memory of being unwanted. The silence that made the child inside you feel invisible again. The betrayal that reopened the part of you that never felt safe to begin with. And that is where your real power lies. Not in guarding your heart, but in understanding it. Not in staying untouched, but in becoming unshakable through presence. You don't have to armor up. You have to wake up. To feel deeply without letting it drown you. To allow the waves of hurt to come, knowing they don't define you, they reveal you. Every one of us carries hidden chapters. Emotions we never had the space to express. Childhoods that left us writing stories in our heads just to survive. We've learned to mask the pain with busyness, with perfection, with trying to always be enough. But the truth is, the parts you've buried aren't gone. They're just waiting for you to come back for them. And maybe today is that moment. That quiet invitation to breathe, to feel, to listen. Not to the noise outside, but to the quiet truth within. That you don't need to have it all together. That you're not broken. You're becoming. And becoming is messy. Becoming is sacred. You never needed to be unbreakable. You only ever needed to be honest. To be here. To be you. Fully. Softly. Fiercely. That's where it all begins. There comes a moment when the pain no longer feels like something happening to you, but something rising from within. A quiet, burning truth that's waited in silence while you search the world for answers. You've tried to be good enough, soft enough, wise enough, believing that if you just showed up perfectly, life would finally return the favor. That kindness would be your shield. That patience and understanding would grant you peace. But life doesn't work like that. The world isn't obligated to reward your effort with fairness. And that's where the suffering begins, when you believe it should. Control feels safe, doesn't it? Like if you just hold everything tight enough, plan it all perfectly, you'll be spared. But the harder you grip, the more life slips through your fingers. The more you try to protect yourself, the more trapped you become, caught in the exhausting dance of managing what was never yours to manage. Real peace doesn't come from getting everything right. It comes from letting go of the belief that you ever had control in the first place. If you want to stop suffering, stop waiting for the world to behave. Stop giving your power away to people's moods, to their silence, their praise, their indifference. Because as long as your peace depends on what someone else does, you are handing them the keys to your inner world. And the truth is, no one out there has that kind of power unless something inside of you allows them to. That's where the real battle begins. Not out there, but inside. In the shadows you don't want to face. In the memories you've buried. The stories you never question. The parts of yourself you learn to hate. The very things you avoid become the quiet architects of your life. They speak through anxiety, through endless repetition, through the ache of relationships that mirror your deepest fears. You think you're choosing, but often it's the wound choosing for you. Waking up is not a graceful process. It doesn't arrive like a whisper. It erupts like an earthquake, a heartbreak that splits you open, a loss that pulls the ground from beneath you, a moment so raw, so undeniable that everything you thought you knew begins to unravel, and somewhere in that unraveling you hear it, the faint call from something deeper. Not destruction, but invitation. Not punishment, but truth. You begin to see clearly, maybe for the first time, that what you thought was control only was fear. That the mask you wore was never really yours. That you've been living someone else's life, shaped by expectations and survival. And now, finally, you're being asked to choose something else. Not because it's easy, but because it's real. If something is stirring in you now, if your chest feels tight or your eyes sting for reasons you can't explain, then know this. You are not alone. You are not falling apart. You are breaking through. This is the beginning of remembering who you are underneath all the noise. the beginning of living from your truth, not the one built to impress or to please, but the one that's always been waiting in silence for you to come home. You are not late. You are not behind. You're exactly where you need to be. Keep going. Everything you're seeking is already inside you, waiting to be seen. There's a reason you feel what you feel, even when you can't explain it. That sudden rush of emotion that catches you off guard. The sting of someone's words that lingers far longer than it should. The way you react so sharply, so quickly, and then wonder why. It's not random. It's not weakness. It's your soul trying to get your attention. A buried truth resurfacing. A part of you, long exiled, rising from the depths to be seen. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." And that's exactly what's happening. More often than you'd like to admit. Not because you're broken, not because you're lost, but because you're carrying stories, wounds, and beliefs that never had the chance to be heard. You've pushed parts of yourself into silence, your fears, your pain, your unmet needs, and assumed time would erase them. But time doesn't heal what you refuse to face. It only hides it. And what's hidden doesn't vanish. It waits. It waits in your patterns. It waits in your relationships. It waits in those quiet moments when you're finally alone and everything you've been avoiding starts to whisper back. You think you're just having a bad day or that you're overreacting. But these reactions aren't new. They're ancient. Echoes from earlier versions of you, smaller, softer, unheard versions, who still live inside, aching to be understood. This is the unconscious. Not some distant abstract idea, but a living, breathing force within you. It holds everything you've suppressed, everything you didn't have words for. Every time you were told to be strong instead of vulnerable. Every time you chose silence over confrontation. Every time you pretended you were fine when you were crumbling inside. All of that energy went somewhere. And it didn't disappear. It formed your shadow. You wonder why you fall into the same painful relationships, and why you sabotage yourself when you finally start feeling safe. Why joy feels fleeting and peace slips through your fingers. It's not fate. It's not bad luck. It's the unconscious trying to break through, forcing you to confront what you thought you buried for good. And the harder you resist it, the louder it becomes. Through anxiety, through anger, through emotional collapse. You've spent so much time trying to control the outside world, trying to be unshakable, unbothered, untouchable. But in that effort to shield yourself, you've only made yourself more exposed. Because the moment something touches that raw spot within you, everything falls apart. Not because of what happened, but because of what it triggered. You can't protect yourself by disconnecting. You don't heal by silencing your truth. What you reject within yourself doesn't go quietly. It fights to be seen. It shows up in the tension between who you pretend to be and who you really are. It bleeds into your choices. It builds cages around your potential. And the longer you deny it, the more power it gains. But here's the truth. Nothing changes until you face it. You can't heal what you refuse to acknowledge. You can't find peace while still condemning parts of yourself. The shadow isn't your enemy. It's the part of you that's been waiting the longest to come home, the child still aching, the teenager still lost, the adult still carrying pain that doesn't belong to them. They're all still inside, asking for one thing, to be accepted. Because until you meet your shadow, it will keep guiding you, quietly, relentlessly, making choices for you while you call it destiny. But the moment you turn toward it, the moment you say, "I see you," everything begins to shift. You stop running. You start remembering. And you finally understand. It was never about becoming someone new. It was always about returning to who you really are. True strength has never been about how well you can hide. It's not found in how stoic your face can stay or how tightly you can seal your pain behind a smile. Real strength, the kind that frees you, comes from daring to turn inward, from finally asking yourself, what am I hiding from? What am I trying not to feel? It's not about being unbothered. It's about being deeply, radically honest. With your fear. With your wounds. With the voices inside you that you've been trying to silence for years. You've been taught that safety lives behind a wall. That if you're guarded enough, if you stop caring enough, if you distance yourself far enough, then nothing can hurt you. But nothing can reach you either. Not joy, not connection, not truth. You end up living like a ghost in your own life. A polished surface covering a soul that's slowly fading, aching to be seen. That numbness you wear like armor. It doesn't mean you've healed. It means you've frozen. And there's a difference. You might say, I'm over it, but your body still flinches at familiar tones. You might say, I've moved on, but your heart still tightens in the quiet. You might seem invincible, but inside you're still bleeding in silence. Pain doesn't disappear because you ignore it. It becomes your compass in disguise. It guides your reactions, sabotages your relationships, whispers through the choices you can't explain, and the longer you run from it, the louder it gets. The more life will echo it back to you through patterns you thought you'd escaped. You'll keep meeting the same wound in different faces, in different circumstances, until you finally pause and say, I see you. That's the journey. Not to destroy the pain, but to understand it. To bring it in close and say, tell me what I've refused to hear. Because what you refuse to feel, you will continue to repeat. You'll keep spinning in circles and wondering why nothing feels real, why nothing lasts, why peace always slips through your fingers just when you think you found it. This is the cost of emotional disconnection, of never learning how to sit with what hurts. You don't heal by bypassing your darkness. You heal by walking through it, slowly, gently, willingly. You become whole by gathering every piece of you that you've been told was too much, too sensitive, too angry, too loud, too soft, and welcoming them home. And this isn't just about emotional health. This is about reclaiming your life. Because without self-awareness, you're not really choosing your path. You're reacting to it. You're being pulled by forces within you that you've never named, making decisions from wounds you pretend don't exist, performing roles you were never meant to play. Don't wait for life to crack you open. Don't wait until you're standing in the rubble and wondering how you ended up here again. Begin now. Begin with the truth. Begin with the ache. Because healing doesn't start when the pain ends. It begins the moment you choose to stop running from it. When you're finally ready to look your inner chaos in the eye and say, you have my attention. Carl Jung once said, learn all the theories, master all the techniques, but as you touch a human soul, be just another human soul. He wasn't just speaking to therapists. He was speaking to all of us, to the part of you that thinks you need to be flawless to be worthy, to the part of you that's exhausted from pretending to be strong. He was reminding us that presence, raw, honest, human presence, is more powerful than anything you've been trying to become. That invitation isn't just for how you treat others. It's for how you treat yourself. You don't need to analyze your soul like a problem to fix. You need to meet it, gently, as one human soul meeting another. And maybe, for the first time, realize they're the same. Because buried beneath the mask you wear to survive, there's a trembling sacred truth that has waited patiently for your return. And that truth is not weakness, and it is your anchor, your root, the place where your real life begins. And yes, in many of the places we come from, we've inherited a distorted idea of what strength looks like. We were taught to grit our teeth, to carry the pain in silence, to never let it show. But that is not strength. That is survival. And survival is not the same as being alive. You are allowed to feel. You are allowed to break. You are allowed to heal, not by hardening, but by softening, by becoming honest, real, and whole. Not perfect, whole. And maybe that's where it all begins. We were handed a script before we even understood the words. Be strong, stay quiet, don't cry, don't feel too much, don't make things harder than they already are. So we swallowed our grief, bit our tongues, wore masks with practiced ease. We learned early that to be accepted often meant to disappear, bit by bit, emotion by emotion. Somewhere along the way, silence became survival, and we mistook that survival for strength. But that's not strength. That's abandonment. That's exile from the most sacred parts of ourselves. That's a soul hiding in plain sight, trying to breathe beneath layers of pretending, performing, pleasing. Real strength isn't found in how well you can conceal your pain. It's in how bravely you choose to face it, and how deeply you're willing to listen to the parts of you the world told you to mute. Because the moment you bring your wounds into the light, not to fix them, not to fight them, but to honor them, they begin to lose their grip. They stop running your life from the shadows. You stop reacting without knowing why. You stop letting every small moment trigger something vast and unhealed. You begin to choose, with intention, with clarity, with presence. And in a world where so many lie half asleep, that choice alone becomes an act of quiet revolution. Jung called it individuation, the journey of becoming yourself, not the version shaped by guilt or fear or loyalty to what broke you, but the self that rises from the center of your being, the one that is whole because it holds both light and shadow, the one that is free not because it feels no pain, but because it no longer fears it. It's not about being better. It's about being real. And being real requires courage, the kind of courage your ancestors knew, the courage it takes to feel what generations were told to bury, to cry the tears they held back, to tell the truth they never could. Well, this is not just healing for you. This is a breaking of cycles, a reclaiming of something sacred. But you must be willing to face what you've been running from, not to punish yourself, not to drown in it, but to understand, because pain doesn't go away when ignored. It waits, it reshapes, it becomes something else, something harder to name, a restlessness, a rage, a numbness that wraps itself around your days and steals the color from your joy. You tell yourself you're fine, you stay busy, you laugh on cue, but deep down, you know. You feel it, something unspoken threading its way through your relationships, your choices, your dreams. And no matter how much you accomplish, it doesn't go away, because it's not outside of you, it's within. And until you stop distracting yourself and sit quietly with it, it will keep writing your story without your consent. Pain is not your enemy. It's a doorway, a sacred threshold leading straight into the truth you've forgotten. And yes, it hurts. Yes, it terrifies. But buried inside that ache is something luminous, something waiting to return you to yourself. From the very beginning, you were taught to run from pain, to silence it, to override it. But pain isn't asking you to suffer. It's asking you to listen, to finally hear what's been unsaid, to see what you've kept in the dark, to feel what you've numbed for too long. Because only in that space, raw, honest, trembling, does transformation begin. Not by force, not by fixing, but by remembering. By allowing yourself to be seen by you, fully, gently, without shame. And that's when the healing begins. Jung never saw suffering as a failure. He didn't see it as weakness or punishment or some detour to avoid. He saw it as a message, a sacred signal from the depths of your being, a voice rising from the unconscious, not to torment you, but to awaken you. He said depression is like a woman dressed in black. If she shows up at your door, don't push her away. Invite her in. Offer her a seat. Pour her some coffee. And ask her what she's come to teach you. But we don't do that. We drown her out with distractions, bury her beneath noise, productivity, and polished appearances. Because to sit in silence with our pain, to truly feel it, to ask it what it wants, terrifies us. It demands something we were never taught to give ourselves. Our presence, our honesty, our surrender. And yet, pain has always had something to say. If it still hurts, it's because some part of you is still at war with yourself. Some part of you is still trying to suppress, hide, escape. But you can't run from what lives inside you. You can't exile parts of your soul and expect to feel whole. As long as you reject those broken, trembling pieces, they will keep haunting you. You'll keep chasing peace in all the wrong places, not realizing that what you seek is not out there. It's been knocking on your door, disguised as discomfort, as grief, as the ache that never quite leaves. For those of us born into cultures shaped by silent suffering, into bloodlines that carry histories of survival, shame, and untold stories, this truth is vital. We were taught to endure, not to heal, to keep going, not to feel, but endurance without awareness becomes an exile. And we are starving for the medicine we were never given, the permission to feel, the space to grieve, the strength to transform, not by escaping ourselves, but by finally returning home. There's a quiet war inside you, a split between the part of you that yearns for growth, for truth, for liberation, and the part that clings to the familiar, even if it's painful, even if it's suffocating. The ego, so trained in control, will always choose the known over the unknown, even if the known is killing you slowly. That's where suffering begins, in the gap between who you are and who you pretend to be, between what you know you need and what you're still too afraid to claim. Change isn't clean. Rebirth is never painless. To let go of an old version of yourself is to mourn something no one else may see, but that shaped your entire life. It's a death, invisible to the world, but real enough to shake you to your core. And yet, as that version of you collapses, something new begins to emerge. Not immediately, not in perfect clarity, but in the wreckage, in the stillness that follows, you begin to meet yourself. Not the you who smiles on command, or fits neatly into others' expectations. The real you, soft, scared, honest, whole. That moment of radical vulnerability when your masks fall and your defenses drop. That's the sacred threshold. That's when suffering becomes holy, because it brings you face to face with what you've been seeking all along. Yourself. Not a new identity, not a better role, but the essence that's been waiting beneath all the layers you've been taught to wear. Jung understood this. He knew that pain was not an error in the system. It was the system waking you up. The suffering isn't the end. It's the beginning, the doorway, the initiation into your real life. And most people, when they reach that threshold, turn back. They get scared. They retreat into routine, back to distraction, back to numbness. They choose the dull ache of the familiar over the unpredictable fire of transformation. But you're still here. You're still listening, which means there's a part of you, no matter how small, that refuses to go back to sleep. A part of you that knows the truth, that on the other side of this pain is not your destruction, but your return. That the darkness you fear isn't there to consume you, it's there to reveal you. This isn't the end of your story. It's the beginning of your becoming. If you're still here, if these words have reached you and you haven't looked away, then something inside you is already changing. Something deeper than thought, older than words. You didn't come this far by an accident. You're here because you're ready to descend, ready to let go, ready to stop living at the surface where life is loud but empty, where you've performed strength for so long it's become exhausting just to keep the mask in place. What lies ahead isn't easy. It isn't neat. It isn't something you can master with intellect alone. This path, the path of individuation, isn't one of comfort. It doesn't reward appearances or status. It doesn't flatter the ego. It dismantles it, slowly, relentlessly, until all that's left is what's real. It asks you to walk away from who you thought you were so you can finally return to who you've always been. And that's terrifying, but it's also the most honest thing you will ever do. Because before you become who you are meant to be, you must unravel everything you pretended to be. You must shed the stories, the roles, the armor you wore to survive. And no matter how strong you are, that shedding hurts. It burns. Because somewhere along the line, those masks started to feel like skin. You believed that being what others wanted would keep you safe. You learned to perform, to impress, to shrink, to please, but you can't live your truth and someone else's expectations at the same time. Something will break. And maybe that something is already cracking inside you. You are not your achievements. You are not your trauma. You are not the image you've curated to be accepted. That's not who you are. That's who you became to survive a world that taught you to fear your own depth. But survival isn't the same as living. And existing behind a mask, no matter how polished, no matter how praised, is still kind of the death. The truth is, the life you ache for doesn't come by becoming more. It comes by becoming less performative, less attached, less afraid to be seen as you truly are. Because individuation, as Jung said, is not about improvement. It's about integration. It's about meeting your shadow, holding it close, and no longer letting it rule your choices from behind the curtain. It's about hearing your rage and your grief and your longing, not to silence them, but to finally understand what they have been trying to say all along. And then something happens. Slowly, but with a force you can't deny. The unconscious rises. The parts of you that you buried because they didn't fit. Your sensitivities, your fire, your truth. They begin to surface. And yes, it's overwhelming. It shakes the ground beneath what you thought was stable. But in that shaking, you begin to feel something you haven't felt in years. Your aliveness. The persona begins to fall. The smile you wore to be liked. The strength you faked to be respected. The certainty you projected to avoid rejection. One by one, these pieces begin to fall away. And you realize none of them were you. They were echoes, adaptations, ghosts. Peeling them off feels like death because in a way, it is. It's the death of the false self. But only through that death can the real self be born. Not the invulnerable one, not the perfect one, the real one, the one who's felt too much, lost too much, survived too much, and still, somehow, is willing to love again, to try again, to be seen again, not as a product, not as a projection, but as a soul. That's what strength really is. Not the absence of pain, but the presence of truth, the ability to sit with yourself without running, the moment you stop needing to be right, the moment you no longer seek applause, the moment you don't need anyone to understand, because you finally do. That's clarity. And once you taste it, there's no going back. You no longer chase validation. You don't need to win every fight. You don't beg to be chosen. You choose yourself, not as a concept, but as a daily act, quiet, steady, unshakable. And that, right there, is the beginning of real freedom. You don't need to be adored anymore because now you know who you are. And that kind of knowing, quiet, rooted, unshakable, becomes your sanctuary. It doesn't demand applause. It doesn't beg to be seen. It simply is. It lives in you like breath, like a steady flame that doesn't flicker with every gust of wind. That's what real resilience feels like. Not a wall to keep the world out, but a core so deeply integrated that nothing external can define you anymore. You don't hide your wounds. You don't deny your past. You hold it all, the shame, the fear, the parts you once rejected, and you let them belong. They don't weigh you down anymore, they ground you. You no longer split yourself into acceptable and unacceptable fragments. Now you stand whole. And in that wholeness, you hurt, but you do not collapse. You bleed, but you do not vanish into the wound. Because you no longer react, you respond, from presence, from clarity, from a truth that's no longer borrowed or performed. And that changes everything. You've left the shallow places, the spaces where noise was mistaken for connection, where performance passed for intimacy. Now you live in the deep, where silence speaks more than words, where feeling is not weakness but wisdom. But those depths, they come with solitude, not because you're unloved, but because so few are willing to walk this far into themselves. People will stay at the surface, they will clutch their distractions, they will mistake numbness for strength. And when you begin to pull away, not out of anger, not out of pride, but from necessity, it may look like distance. But it's not rejection. It's growth. You're simply rising out of places you once had to shrink to survive. This shedding, this evolution, it's not a betrayal of the past. It's the fulfillment of it. Something in you has awakened, something you can no longer compress or deny. And it's not chaos. It's not a breakdown. It's your soul reclaiming its space. And that's where you reach the final threshold, the one no one prepares you for. The moment you realize your protection no longer comes from defense. It comes from awareness. Now consciousness becomes your shield, not strength as the world defines it, not dominance, not perfection, but clarity, piercing, luminous clarity. Because when you're conscious, you're no longer at the mercy of what others think, say, or do. You don't crumble under criticism. You don't inflate from praise. You're not chasing or avoiding, you're awake. But let's be honest. Awakening isn't some mystical lightning bolt that descends from the sky. It's not a one-time miracle. It's a daily decision, a sacred labor to turn inward again and again, especially when it hurts, especially when everything in you wants to run. Awakening means choosing to feel even when it's easier to go numb. It means holding yourself accountable for your emotions, not blaming your past, not blaming others, not blaming life. It means showing up for yourself like you always needed someone else to do. That's where your real life begins. You've resisted for so long. The fear of it not being enough, the ache of being unseen, the hollow silence of nights where you wondered if anyone would ever understand. You've clung to perfection like it was your only lifeline. You've gritted your teeth through heartbreak, through abandonment, through the suffocating weight of invisibility. And you wore that pain like armor, not because it made you strong, but because the world never gave you permission to be soft. So you learned to hide, to smile through the cracks, to keep everything under control, but control is not peace, and perfection is not safety. And now, you're tired, not just in your body, in your soul, in the deepest parts of you that no one sees. Because the battle wasn't just against the world, it was against the parts of yourself you were told not to love, but something inside you is shifting. Waking, whispering, you're starting to understand. Finally, real resilience isn't about building harder walls. It's about becoming so whole, so rooted, that you don't need walls at all. You don't have to brace for impact anymore, because you've stopped making your pain the enemy. True strength isn't cold. It isn't distant. It's soft. It's honest. It's human. It's the quiet, grounded power of someone who's met their shadow and didn't run. Someone who's been shattered and still chose to stay open. Someone who now knows immunity isn't about never hurting again. It's about never abandoning yourself again. It's not about turning away. It's about facing it, everything, with open eyes and an open heart. Not retreating behind stronger defenses, but learning to see more clearly. To sit with the truth, even when it stings. To feel fully without letting it consume you, because that's the shift. That's the quiet transformation. When you stop running from the wound and start listening to it. There's a moment, subtle but life-altering, when you begin to recognize your own patterns. the way you react when someone criticizes you, the fear that rises when someone pulls away, the sudden anger, the old ache, the silent shrinking. When you start witnessing instead of spiraling, something begins to dissolve. You stop taking it all so personally. Rejection no longer carves through you. Indifference doesn't define your worth. You still feel it, yes, but you don't drown in it anymore. You stay anchored, present, alive. And that changes everything. Because protection doesn't come from walls. It comes from awareness, from diving into life. Not to escape it, not to control it, but to experience it fully without shutting down. It's not about being untouched by pain. It's about knowing how to hold it, how to walk with it, how to stay soft in a world that tried to make you hard. Those who only know the surface get swept away by every storm. Every wave hits them like a collapse. But those who dare to go deep, who step into the quiet, shadowy parts of themselves, they discover something unshakable. A depth that holds steady. A stillness that doesn't disappear when the world gets loud. And maybe that's where you're heading. Slowly, cautiously, but moving nonetheless. Toward the place where your strength is no longer performance, but presence. Where you're no longer begging to be loved for being what you're not. You're simply being. And that's enough. Because when you begin to live from that space, from your truth, not the one shaped by fear or expectation, but the one rooted in your soul, the world no longer knows how to break you. Not because it's gotten easier, but because you've gotten real, whole, and there's nothing more powerful than someone who's made peace with themselves. So if something in these words stirred something in you, even just a flicker, don't ignore it. Write it down. Whisper it to yourself. I choose awareness. I choose truth. I choose to feel, not just the good, not just the light, but all of it. I choose to be here, awake, in the mess and the beauty, without needing to hide. Because the world doesn't need more perfection. It needs more honesty. It needs people willing to live without the mask, to bleed without shame, to begin again, not as who they think they should be, but as who they are. And that's you, right now, beginning again. Not because everything is clear, but because you're finally done pretending, and that is more than enough.